There comes a moment in every soul's journey when peace, once steady and reliable, begins to tremble in the presence of someone who was once your comfort. It's not always obvious at first. It starts quietly as a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a feeling that something sacred within you no longer rests easily when they are near. The laughter that used to flow feels hollow. The conversations that once inspired you now drain you. It's as though the universe itself has begun to whisper that the connection has served its purpose. Disturbed peace is not punishment. It is revelation. It is the soul's alarm system ringing softly, urging you to notice what your mind keeps rationalizing away. You tell yourself it's just a phase, that things will return to how they used to be. But deep down, you sense that something fundamental has changed. The rhythm of your relationship has shifted, not through conflict or betrayal, but through divine timing. When peace leaves, it rarely does so without reason. It departs to signal that alignment has been lost. You may not have fought, argued, or grown cold. Yet the connection feels heavier, less alive. The truth is, peace can no longer dwell where purpose has expired. Every relationship has a spiritual expiration date, not because people are disposable, but because growth demands evolution. What once brought you harmony may now hinder your higher becoming. Many ignore this disturbance, fearing loss more than misalignment. They cling to what once was, hoping that by holding tighter, they can resuscitate something God is trying to release. But peace doesn't lie. Its absence is never random. It is divine discomfort, a sacred message disguised as emotional unease. You might feel restless, anxious, even irritable without understanding why. These are not signs of impatience. They are signals of spiritual resistance. You are being guided away from a vibration that no longer nourishes your destiny. Often, the heart and the spirit are not in agreement. The heart still remembers the moments of warmth, the laughter, the shared dreams. But the spirit sees the unseen, the invisible truth that the season has ended. When peace departs, the spirit has already moved on. What remains is attachment, nostalgia, and fear. Yet even fear serves a function. It reveals where you trust God least. It shows where you still depend on people for a sense of stability that was never meant to replace your inner foundation. When the peace within you becomes disturbed, notice what changes. Do you feel small when you speak to them? Do you find yourself editing your truth to maintain their comfort? Do you feel unseen, unheard, or energetically burdened? These are not coincidences. These are the soul's quiet indicators that something is no longer sacred in its current form. Relationships built on spiritual harmony cannot survive on memory alone. They require mutual evolution. When only one person grows, peace becomes fragmented. God often uses the loss of peace as the first signal that a person's role in your life is shifting. He won't shout it through chaos at first. He'll whisper it through subtle discontent. You'll notice it when you pray and can't find clarity. You'll notice it when you try to force joy and it feels like performance. You'll notice it when silence between you feels heavier than conversation. These are sacred symptoms of misalignment. It's easy to misinterpret this disturbance as personal failure. You might think you're the problem, that if you were more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, things would return to normal. But divine discontent isn't punishment, it's preparation. It is God's way of loosening your grip so that He can redirect your energy towards something greater. Sometimes he disturbs your peace not to take something away, but to restore the peace you lost by staying too long in what no longer fits your frequency. Every soul has a vibration, and when two frequencies drift too far apart, dissonance occurs. It doesn't mean one is higher or better. It simply means one is evolving while the other remains still. The tension you feel is the sound of two energies no longer in tune. You can try to force harmony, but the melody of your life will always fall out of rhythm until you honor what your spirit already knows. Not everyone is meant to accompany you into every chapter. Disturbed peace is a sacred teacher. It asks for honesty, courage, and surrender. It teaches you that attachment without alignment leads to suffering. It reminds you that your intuition is divine communication. That quiet nudge you keep feeling isn't anxiety, it's direction. And though your heart may grieve the distance that follows, your soul will eventually thank you for listening. In moments of confusion, seek silence. The truth always whispers before it roars. When you stop chasing noise, peace returns, not because circumstances changed, but because you did. The more you honor your intuition, the more you realize that disturbed peace is not a curse, it is guidance. It is God's way of protecting what He is cultivating within you. He disturbs your comfort not to hurt you, but to heal you from what cannot go with you into your next season. When peace becomes disturbed, it is the soul's sacred invitation to pause, reflect, and listen, to ask not what's wrong with them, but what truth am I avoiding within myself? Because often the person God is trying to remove from your life is not a villain, they are simply a chapter. And when the story must turn its page, peace must first remind you that the sentence has already reached its end. There is a moment in every connection when words begin to lose their power. What once felt like seamless understanding suddenly turns into misinterpretation. You speak with the same intention, but somehow it no longer lands. They hear your voice, but not your meaning. You try to bridge the gap with explanation, patience, and love, yet each attempt feels like trying to translate your soul into a language that no longer fits the relationship. This is the second sign, a divine signal that something spiritual has shifted. When communication turns into confusion. Confusion is not random. It is the universe's subtle way of showing that two souls are no longer aligned on the same wavelength. Once upon a time, you could read each other without effort. A look, a tone, a single word carried understanding. But as growth begins to separate paths, the energy that once flowed freely between you now feels interrupted. Conversations that used to build connection now drain your strength. The more you try to clarify, the more misunderstood you feel. It's not that your words have changed. It's that your souls are now vibrating at different frequencies. When communication begins to fracture, many people assume something is wrong with them. They wonder, am I not expressing myself correctly? Have I become distant? Yet often, the real truth lies deeper. Divine miscommunication arises when the spiritual contract between two people has begun to dissolve. It is not merely emotional or psychological, it's energetic. God uses confusion as protection. When clarity disappears, it's often because your intuition is being redirected toward silence, so you can finally hear your own voice again. At first, it feels frustrating. You replay every conversation, trying to fix what's broken. You rewrite messages, you choose your words more carefully, you over-explain in hopes that peace will return. But it doesn't. Instead, every attempt to resolve only seems to deepen the misunderstanding. You begin to realize that no matter how lovingly you speak, it's as though you're talking across dimensions, one rooted in your present growth, the other anchored in your past self. This kind of confusion is divine in disguise. It's a sacred indicator that the emotional bridge that once connected two souls has begun to collapse, not from neglect, but from transformation. You are no longer meant to meet each other in the same way. Your conversations are no longer about shared evolution. They've become echoes of what used to be. One person might still be speaking from their old patterns, while the other now speaks from wisdom learned through pain. When one soul evolves, the vocabulary of connection must evolve too. Sometimes God allows this breakdown because words have served their purpose. You were meant to teach each other something, to mirror each other's wounds, to awaken something sleeping within. And once that awakening happens, communication loses its original function. It's not cruelty, it's closure. The confusion is the silence between the old chapter and the new one, a pause before redirection. Miscommunication is also a mirror. It shows you what you've been avoiding. When someone continually misunderstands your truth, you start to see what parts of you have been silenced for too long. You realize how much energy you've spent trying to be understood by people who were never meant to understand this version of you. You begin to see the difference between speaking for connection and speaking for validation. There's a spiritual exhaustion that comes from over-explaining yourself to someone who has stopped listening with the heart. You start to feel as though your words are being scattered into a void, and no matter how genuine your intent, they return distorted. This is when confusion becomes the divine messenger. It arrives not to torment you, but to teach you that some conversations can only happen between you and God. When communication begins to fail, your intuition often grows louder. You feel pulled towards solitude, reflection, silence. The more you resist that pull, the heavier your heart becomes, because sometimes the message is simple. God is ending the conversation that your fear keeps continuing. He's asking you to stop trying to be understood and instead start understanding why you no longer feel at peace. In spiritual terms, confusion is not the opposite of clarity. It is the birthplace of it. Before God reveals what's next, He often blurs what's current. It is the fog that precedes awakening. You cannot clearly see what is being removed while you're still trying to fix it. The distortion forces you inward, back toward your own voice, back toward divine guidance. You'll notice this confusion most in moments where you try to reconnect. Every discussion turns circular. Every effort to find common ground ends with exhaustion instead of relief. It's as if both of you are speaking truths that simply don't belong to each other anymore. You realize that it's not about right or wrong, it's about timing. What used to resonate now repels. The bond that once nourished your growth now confines it. This is when many people feel tested. They confuse the loss of communication with failure, believing they must try harder, love harder, explain better. But sometimes the sacred act of love is letting the silence speak for you. When you stop forcing connection, you begin to see where God has already withdrawn His grace from the conversation. Divine relationships are built on shared spiritual frequency. When that frequency shifts, communication becomes distorted, not because love has vanished, but because the lesson has been learned. You have evolved beyond the need for that dynamic. What remains is not anger, but sacred distance, the kind of separation that protects your peace and preserves your growth. Confusion in communication is therefore not a curse, it is a compass. It guides you away from dependency and toward discernment. It teaches you to stop chasing validation through explanation. It reminds you that sometimes understanding isn't meant to come from others. It's meant to rise from within. When every word you speak feels like it vanishes into misunderstanding, pause. You're not losing your voice. You're being guided back to it. Silence, then, becomes the language of divine transition. The words that no longer connect are simply proof that your spirit is outgrowing what it once needed to express. When communication turns into confusion, it is not the end of love. It is the beginning of alignment. It is God's quiet way of showing that not every connection is meant to continue speaking the same language forever, and that sometimes the deepest understanding comes not from being heard, but from finally listening to what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. There is a subtle shift that happens when someone's presence begins to cloud your path. You may not notice it right away. It begins quietly, like a dimming of light you can't explain. Things that once moved smoothly start to stall. Ideas lose momentum. Doors that used to open effortlessly begin to resist your knocking. It feels as though the rhythm of your life has slowed, not from lack of effort, but from invisible interference. And that interference, more often than not, is energy, the kind that disrupts divine flow. When opportunities begin to fade around someone, it is not coincidence, it is divine recalibration. Opportunities are energetic in nature. They respond to alignment, not intention alone. When you are surrounded by people whose presence resonates with your purpose, life expands. Paths clear, synchronicities increase, abundance flows. But when someone's vibration clashes with your own, when their presence carries unhealed heaviness, jealousy, or unconscious resistance, the flow begins to constrict. It's as though the universe itself starts protecting you by withholding blessings that would be wasted in the wrong environment. This fading of opportunities is not a punishment, it's a spiritual signal. It's how God tells you, this person cannot go where I'm sending you. Sometimes the blessings meant for you pause until you release what cannot carry the same light. Because divine timing is not just about when, it's about who is meant to be with you when the blessing arrives. If the wrong soul is standing beside you, the blessing will wait. At first, it feels unfair. You start questioning yourself. Why does everything feel blocked? Why do things fall apart when this person enters my space? You might even feel guilty for noticing. You tell yourself you're imagining it, that love or loyalty should overlook such things. But energy doesn't lie. Pay attention to the patterns. When their presence brings confusion, when your plans stall, when joy feels heavy, when inspiration fades. Those are divine breadcrumbs pointing you toward awareness. God often tests our discernment before promotion. He'll send subtle disruptions, not to harm us, but to see if we can sense the difference between a companion and a distraction. Some people carry spiritual weight that drains possibility. They are not evil, they are simply misaligned. Their unresolved energy competes with your evolution. The moment they enter your orbit, your frequency adjusts to accommodate them, and in that compromise, your light dims. You might notice it through your work. Projects that once thrived suddenly stagnate. Creative ideas vanish the moment you share them with this person. Opportunities that were certain suddenly dissolve without reason. Sometimes you feel it physically, fatigue, doubt, or anxiety rising after spending time with them. These sensations are not random, they're messages from your intuition. The soul knows when its environment has become spiritually polluted. When opportunities fade, it often means your energy is being tested for loyalty, not loyalty to people, but loyalty to purpose. You cannot receive divine abundance while holding on to what blocks divine flow. It is impossible to build light in the shadow of what drains it. Every delay is protection, every detour a redirection toward clarity. The fading is not loss, it's the soft removal of what you were never meant to depend on. There's a mysterious intelligence behind divine timing. You may think you're ready for success, healing, or breakthrough, but God sees the full picture. He knows who celebrates your growth in public, but resents it in silence. He knows whose smile hides envy, whose support is conditional, whose energy quietly opposes your expansion. And so, instead of revealing your next level in the presence of hidden sabotage, He dims the lights, He pauses the flow. He conceals your blessing until your circle is pure enough to handle it. This is why discernment becomes sacred. You must learn to observe not only how people act toward you, but how your life behaves around them. Does peace increase or disappear? Does momentum build or collapse? Do you feel more creative or more confused? The soul always speaks through energy before words. If every door begins to close when someone steps in, understand that the universe is not punishing you. It's protecting the seed of your destiny from being choked by the wrong soil. Sometimes the blockage isn't dramatic. It might appear as subtle stagnation. Things simply stop evolving. You feel uninspired. Your goals feel distant. The spark you once carried fades. This is what happens when divine purpose is trapped in an atmosphere of spiritual misalignment. The energy exchange between you and the other person begins to weigh down what was meant to rise freely. You'll notice, too, that when distance finally comes, when you begin to separate, intentionally or by circumstance, the flow returns almost immediately. Suddenly, clarity comes back. Opportunities that were once lost reappear in new forms. Your spirit feels lighter. This isn't coincidence, it's confirmation. The moment your energy is no longer entangled with what hinders it, divine order resumes. In spiritual psychology, this phenomenon is often described as vibrational mismatch. Every person carries a field of energy that either harmonizes or clashes with your own. When harmony exists, blessings multiply because both energies amplify each other's resonance. But when dissonance persists, one field tries to pull the other down to equilibrium. The higher vibration always suffers first because it bends itself to maintain connection. That bending creates fatigue, and fatigue blocks manifestation. So, when opportunities begin to fade, don't just analyze the situation, examine the company. Energy alignment determines spiritual access. What's meant for you cannot truly be lost, but it can be delayed until your surroundings reflect your divine readiness. God will never release abundance into an environment that cannot sustain it. Sometimes that environment is not physical, but relational. The wrong soul, no matter how familiar, can alter the frequency of your field just enough to delay your elevation. The most difficult part is acknowledging this truth without resentment. You may care deeply for the person, But care does not equal compatibility. You can love someone and still recognize that their presence constricts your purpose. Letting go then becomes an act of obedience, a declaration that you trust divine timing more than emotional attachment. And once that decision is made, the shift begins. The silence lifts, the opportunities reappear, and the flow resumes because your energy is once again in harmony with your calling. When opportunities fade around someone, it is God's quiet way of protecting the future you cannot yet see. It is His gentle reminder that not every companion is meant to witness your becoming, and not every connection can carry the weight of your anointing. The delay is not rejection, it is refinement. It is the universe preparing your path to open fully, but only after the presence of what blocks your blessing has been gracefully removed. There comes a sacred moment in every sort of illusion when the energy that once felt like home begins to feel too small. The laughter that used to feel effortless now echoes differently, like words spoken in a language your spirit no longer understands. Conversations that once inspired you begin to feel shallow, repetitive, or drained of meaning. It's not that love has died, nor that you've suddenly become ungrateful. It's that your spirit has begun to outgrow the connection. Growth is rarely graceful, and spiritual expansion often reveals what emotional attachment tries to deny. Outgrowing a connection is not a betrayal, it's a transformation. It's the soul's natural response to evolution. As you begin to awaken to deeper truths about who you are, what you value, and what you're called to become, the relationships that were built on an older version of you begin to lose alignment. They start to wobble under the weight of new awareness. What once felt synchronistic now feels misaligned, and what once brought comfort now stirs confusion. You may even feel guilt for sensing this distance, but spiritual growth doesn't always move in pairs. Sometimes it separates what can no longer grow together. You'll first feel it as quiet restlessness, that subtle ache in the background of your interactions. You might notice how your energy drops after seeing them, or how you leave conversations feeling smaller, unseen, or disconnected from your truth. These are not random emotions. They are divine signals that the frequency of the connection no longer matches the vibration of your becoming. Every relationship carries an energetic pattern. When one soul expands and the other resists change, that pattern begins to distort. It's not that one person is better than the other. It's simply that their spiritual timelines have diverged. When your spirit outgrows a connection, your intuition starts whispering long before your mind accepts it. It nudges you to seek solitude, to think more deeply, to question the things you once accepted without thought. But because the human heart clings to familiarity, you often ignore those whispers. You convince yourself that something is wrong with you for wanting space. You try to fit yourself back into the old rhythm, repeating the same conversations, pretending that everything still resonates. Yet the more you pretend, the heavier it becomes. The energy that once uplifted now constrains, and your light begins to dim under the weight of emotional obligation. Growth always demands sacrifice, and one of the greatest sacrifices is comfort. When your consciousness expands, it will naturally pull you away from environments that keep you stagnant. You may try to bring the other person with you to share the insights, the healing, the awareness you've gained. But often they cannot follow. They're not ready to see what you now see, And that's not their failure, it's their timing. You can't force someone to awaken just because you have. You can invite them, inspire them, love them, but you cannot evolve for them. As your spirit grows, it starts to crave authenticity more than attachment. You begin to see through the layers of illusion that once defined your bond. The shared trauma, the unspoken expectations, the comfort of routine. You begin to recognize that much of what you called connection was actually familiarity. The heart confuses what is known with what is right. But as you expand, you realize that true alignment is not about history, it's about harmony. You no longer desire connections that merely fill your time. You desire those that elevate your soul. You may try to resist this truth. You may attempt to fix the growing gap by over-communicating, compromising more, or recreating past joy. But what once flowed effortlessly now feels forced. The laughter doesn't echo the same. The silence feels louder. You begin to sense that your spirit is asking for something deeper, something more aligned with your current vibration. And when the connection cannot rise with you, distance becomes inevitable, not as punishment, but as protection. This process of outgrowing people is often misunderstood as arrogance or coldness, but in truth, it's sacred alignment. The universe rearranges your relationships according to your frequency. When your soul ascends to a higher level of awareness, only those who match that vibration can walk beside you without creating friction. It's why certain friendships fade after spiritual awakenings, why certain loves lose their spark after healing. When you evolve, your energy demands resonance. Anything that resists that vibration begins to dissolve naturally. Sometimes the other person will feel the shift before you do. They may pull away, grow distant, or accuse you of changing. And in a way, they're right. You have changed. You've grown beyond the boundaries of the version of yourself they were attached to. They fell in love with your past frequency, not realizing your spirit was never meant to stay there. Your growth confronts their stillness, and rather than adapt, they retreat. It hurts, but it's necessary, because forcing connection with someone who no longer vibrates with your truth only delays both souls' evolution. You'll notice that once space appears, your energy begins to return. New opportunities show up. Inspiration returns. Your spirit feels lighter, freer, more centered. This is confirmation that the detachment was divinely orchestrated. Every separation that occurs after a spiritual awakening is a calibration. The universe is ensuring that your surroundings mirror your new frequency. Those who remain are those who can evolve with you. Those who fade were never meant to anchor your next level. Outgrowing a connection doesn't always require conflict. Sometimes it simply means growing quietly and letting time reveal the distance. You don't have to explain your transformation to those unwilling to see it. True spiritual growth often moves in silence. When your energy shifts, words become unnecessary. The vibration speaks for itself. You no longer need to justify your need for peace or expansion. The people meant for your journey will understand your silence. Those who don't were never listening in the first place. It's a humbling realization that not everyone can accompany you into every phase of your evolution. Some were teachers, some were mirrors, some were healers, and some were lessons in disguise. But all were necessary for your awakening. Each played their part in shaping the soul you've become. And as your spirit continues to rise, it will keep shedding what no longer resonates. not out of pride, but out of purpose. Because spiritual growth doesn't ask what you're willing to add to your life. It asks what you're willing to release. When your spirit outgrows a connection, it is simply honoring the law of expansion. Energy cannot shrink back to fit what it has already transcended. What was once a source of comfort becomes a cocoon too tight for your wings. The discomfort you feel is not rejection. It's evolution announcing itself through divine dissonance. The soul is whispering that it's time to move toward environments, people, and experiences that match the truth of who you are now, not the memory of who you once were. There comes a time in certain relationships when peace no longer feels natural. You begin to notice that calm moments are brief, fragile, and easily shattered by tension, argument, or misunderstanding. You find yourself constantly trying to fix, explain, or defend, living in a cycle where clarity never lasts long enough to bring relief. What used to be connection has turned into exhaustion. This is what happens when chaos becomes the constant, when disorder replaces peace as the emotional baseline of the relationship, and the soul starts signaling that something sacred has gone out of balance. At first, you may try to rationalize it. You tell yourself it's just stress, miscommunication, or bad timing. You cling to the good moments, hoping they will outweigh the growing unease. But chaos that becomes repetitive is never random. It's not just the result of circumstance, it's a reflection of spiritual misalignment. When two energies that once harmonized begin to conflict, the universe creates turbulence to draw your attention to what your heart is afraid to confront. Every argument, every breakdown, every emotional storm is a symptom of deeper truth. The connection has lost its alignment with peace. Chaos, in its essence, is not always destructive. Sometimes it arrives as divine intervention. When God wants to remove something that you refuse to release, He disturbs your comfort. He allows confusion, tension, and emotional noise to rise until you can no longer pretend that everything is fine. What you perceive as life falling apart is often life being rearranged for your protection. The chaos is the signal. It says, you are not where your spirit can rest anymore. In the early stages, the chaos feels external. You focus on what they said, what you said, the misunderstanding between you. You analyze details, replay scenarios, search for solutions. But over time, you begin to realize that no matter how carefully you move, the storm repeats. Peace becomes temporary, as if your very presence together triggers resistance. This is not because you are incompatible as people. It's because your spiritual paths are no longer aligned. The relationship's energy field has become a battlefield between your old self and your evolving self. When chaos becomes a lifestyle instead of an episode, your nervous system starts to normalize anxiety. You mistake tension for passion and instability for love. You begin to equate emotional highs and lows with depth. Yet deep down, your soul knows the difference. The exhaustion you feel after each argument is not just mental, it's energetic depletion. It's your spirit trying to maintain connection where divine order has already withdrawn its blessing. God's peace will not dwell where you insist on forcing what was never meant to stay. The longer you remain in an environment of constant chaos, the more you lose your sense of self. You start filtering your words, shrinking your truth, or numbing your emotions just to maintain temporary calm. You begin to live in survival mode, adapting to the storm rather than questioning why the storm exists at all. This is how divine disconnection feels. Not explosive, but draining. It erodes your joy slowly, convincing you that chaos is just part of love's cost. But genuine love never thrives in disorder. It breathes in safety, consistency, and mutual respect. When you are connected to the right energy, peace flows naturally. Communication feels light. Disagreements don't destroy, they deepen understanding. But when you are tied to the wrong frequency, peace feels foreign and chaos feels familiar. You begin to crave silence, but fear it at the same time. You long for distance, but guilt keeps you close. The relationship becomes an emotional pendulum, swinging between intensity and emptiness, leaving you disoriented. That confusion is divine in disguise, a mirror reflecting that something within you is trying to evolve beyond constant conflict. Chaos is not just emotional, it's spiritual interference. It clouds intuition and dulls discernment. When you live in prolonged unrest, you stop hearing the quiet voice of guidance within. You mistake adrenaline for purpose, attachment for destiny, drama for meaning. You start believing that struggle is proof of love, when in reality, it's proof of resistance to release. God's lessons are never hidden. He teaches through experience, and sometimes the lesson is simply this: peace should not feel like a reward. It should feel like your natural state. You might begin to notice patterns repeating. The same arguments arise in different forms, as though the relationship is trapped in an emotional loop. That repetition is spiritual feedback, the universe reflecting your unwillingness to change. Each time the pattern repeats, it grows louder, more painful, until you finally ask the question you've been avoiding: why am I staying in a place that keeps hurting me? This is where awakening begins. Awareness breaks through confusion, and you start to see that the chaos is not just happening to you, it's revealing you. Sometimes chaos becomes constant because your energy has become addicted to it. After years of instability, peace feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. When you meet calm energy, you don't know how to rest in it. You expect disruption because it's all you've known. Healing then becomes the process of detoxing from emotional turbulence, learning to exist without needing drama to feel alive. The absence of chaos can feel like emptiness at first, but that emptiness is the space peace needs to return. Spiritually, chaos that never ends is a sign that your path and the other person's have diverged. God allows friction not to destroy you, but to awaken you. He lets the noise grow so loud that you can no longer ignore the truth whispering underneath. This connection no longer aligns with who you're becoming. The arguments, the misunderstandings, the emotional fatigue, they are all divine messengers pointing toward transformation. You might try to fix it, to pray harder, to love deeper, hoping that your persistence will restore harmony. But no amount of effort can recreate peace where growth demands separation. Sometimes God uses chaos to make staying impossible. He removes peace so that you will seek it elsewhere, in solitude, in healing, in divine alignment. The storm is not against you, it's guiding you toward what no longer carries the vibration of your future. As the cycles repeat, you'll start to see that the relationship no longer nourishes your spirit. It consumes it. The chaos becomes predictable. Like a script you've already memorized, you know how it starts, how it escalates, how it ends. The repetition dulls your soul until you can no longer deny what you've outgrown. This recognition is painful but liberating. It means your consciousness has finally risen above the pattern. When chaos becomes the constant, it is no longer just a relational problem. It is a spiritual message written in the language of energy. It tells you that harmony has expired, that your spirit is seeking peace beyond what this connection can offer. That divine order is trying to restore what emotional attachment keeps resisting. It is not about blame or failure. It is about awakening to the truth that love built on turbulence cannot sustain a soul built for peace. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the people around you begin to test the strength of your devotion. Not through open opposition, but through quiet distraction. They don't always pull you away from your faith by argument or persuasion. Sometimes they do it simply by making you forget who you are. You start compromising a little at first, missing a prayer here, silencing your intuition there, putting your purpose on pause for the sake of peace, approval, or companionship. You convince yourself it's temporary, but deep inside, something sacred begins to dim. This is how spiritual erosion begins, not in one dramatic act, but in the slow fading of conviction under the weight of emotional attachment. Faith is not merely belief, it is alignment, the daily decision to remain rooted in what gives your spirit strength and meaning. When someone begins to pull you away from that center, they are not just affecting your habits, they are altering your frequency. They start to shape how you think, what you prioritize, and what you tolerate. You may not even notice it at first, because love and loyalty can disguise themselves as justification. You say to yourself, I'm just being understanding, or I don't want to lose them. But each compromise carries a spiritual cost. Every time you choose comfort over conviction, you drift further from the inner peace that once anchored you. There's a difference between someone who challenges your faith to make it stronger and someone who distracts you from it until you forget its importance. The first awakens growth, the second numbs awareness. The people who truly love you will never ask you to trade your faith for their comfort, nor your calling for their approval. But those who fear your light will subtly make you question it. They might say you're too deep, too serious, or too different now. What they really mean is that your spiritual clarity exposes their confusion. Your faith disrupts their illusion, and rather than facing their own discomfort, they try to lower your vibration to match theirs. Purpose and faith are intertwined. When you lose one, the other weakens. You cannot walk fully in purpose without faith, because purpose requires trust. Trust that what you are called to do has divine meaning, even when the world doesn't understand it. So, when someone begins pulling you away from your faith, they are also pulling you away from your purpose. They disconnect you from the spiritual current that fuels your inner drive. They fill your life with noise, obligations, and emotional storms until you have no energy left for prayer, reflection, or creativity. You begin to live reactively instead of intentionally. You stop asking what God wants for you and start asking what others expect from you. The most dangerous form of manipulation is not control through affection, it's control through affection. When love becomes the tool that convinces you to compromise your spirit, you mistake surrender for devotion. But real love never asks you to betray yourself. Real connection inspires you to rise higher, to seek more truth, to grow deeper in faith, not to drift further from it. When someone's presence begins to make you spiritually small, that's not love, that's a test. The divine is asking you, Will you choose me even when it costs you them? A spiritual misalignment often hides behind emotional comfort. You stay close to those who make you feel seen, even if they don't make you feel right. You confuse belonging with peace, when true peace only comes from alignment. The soul always knows when it's drifting. It speaks through anxiety, through restlessness, through that quiet guilt that whispers when you neglect your faith practices or silence your intuition. But if you ignore it long enough, the voice grows faint. You begin to normalize spiritual emptiness, filling the void with distractions that never satisfy. People who are disconnected from their own purpose often become threatened by yours. They may not even realize they're pulling you away. It's simply the nature of their energy. When your light grows brighter, their shadows become more visible. When your clarity increases, their confusion feels exposed. To stay close to you, they need you to dim yourself. They invite you into chaos disguised as connection, into distraction disguised as love. And because your heart is compassionate, you stay, believing you can help, believing you can heal them. But the longer you remain, the more your own spirit weakens, until the healer becomes the wounded, and the purpose turns to paralysis. Faith is not just a belief in something higher. It's a way of protecting your alignment. It keeps you from giving sacred energy to what does not serve your growth. It keeps you rooted when the world tries to sway you. When you allow someone to pull you away from that, you are giving them access to the deepest part of your soul, the part meant only for divine communion. You may think you're maintaining harmony, but you're trading peace for approval. And the soul always knows the cost of such trades. If your spiritual practices, passions, and purpose used to make you feel alive, but now feel distant, ask yourself who you've allowed too close. Energy is contagious. You can't walk with people who mock your faith and expect your spirit to stay strong. You can't share dreams with those who belittle purpose and expect clarity to remain intact. You become like the energy you surround yourself with. When your circle feeds your distractions more than your discipline, your destiny begins to fade in silence. There will be seasons when your faith isolates you, when your purpose separates you from familiar faces. It will hurt. You will question if you're being too rigid, too spiritual, too uncompromising. But that's how divine refinement feels. It strips away everything that interferes with your alignment. Those who truly belong in your life will never require you to abandon your faith to stay connected. They will walk beside it, honor it, and maybe even find their own through your example. When they pull you away from your faith or purpose, it's not simply a relationship issue. It's a spiritual crossroad. You must decide whether your allegiance lies with the divine call within you or the comfort of those who fear its intensity. Every soul is tested this way, and the outcome of that test defines the rest of your journey. Your purpose cannot fully awaken until your faith becomes unshakable, not just in solitude, but in the presence of those who try to silence it. Your spirit will always call you back, whispering reminders of who you were before you compromised, before you dimmed your light for love that wasn't rooted in truth. Before you mistook acceptance for alignment, before you let someone else's comfort outweigh your calling, there is a quiet moment of realization that arrives before every major transformation. A subtle awareness that something in your spirit no longer feels safe in the presence of certain people. It's not about words spoken or actions taken, it's about energy. You feel it in your body before your mind can explain it. The tension in your chest, the sudden fatigue after conversation, the hesitation to answer messages that once brought excitement. Your intuition starts whispering warnings, not out of fear, but out of protection. When your energy no longer feels safe, it's the soul's way of saying, you have outgrown the vibration of this connection. Energy safety is not about physical comfort, it's about spiritual alignment. True safety is when your spirit can expand freely without fear of judgment, envy, or manipulation. It's when your peace is respected as much as your presence. But when someone's energy becomes heavy, unpredictable, or invasive, your spirit begins to retreat. You become hyper-aware, cautious, guarded. You filter your words, suppress your truth, and minimize your light, all to keep the peace. But what kind of peace costs your authenticity? When you have to shrink yourself to stay connected, that connection has already begun to expire. The discomfort you feel around misaligned energy is sacred intelligence. It's your inner compass warning you of spiritual contamination. Some people carry energy that once resonated with yours, but as you evolve, the harmony dissolves. Their energy may not be bad, but it no longer matches your frequency. You've grown in awareness, but they remain attached to an old version of you, one that tolerated chaos, ignored intuition, and accepted less than you deserved. Now, when you stand in your truth, their spirit feels unsettled. They sense the shift, but can't name it. So they project confusion, distance, or defensiveness. You start to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Am I being cold? But deep down, you know the truth. Your peace is no longer safe in their presence. There's a subtle violence in being around people who cannot honor your evolution. You begin to feel unsafe, not because of what they do, but because of what they deny, your growth. Every time you express something deeper, they dismiss it. Every time you share a boundary, they take offense. They loved you when you were quiet, agreeable, available, and easy to understand. But the moment your spirit expanded, their comfort shrank. They can't control what they no longer comprehend, and control disguised as connection is the most dangerous form of bondage. This energetic tension manifests in simple ways. Conversations feel forced, laughter feels hollow, presence feels heavy. You leave interactions feeling drained instead of nourished. That is not chemistry, that is depletion. The human spirit thrives on reciprocity, an even exchange of energy that uplifts both souls. But when one person feeds and the other only consumes, imbalance sets in. Over time, the giver begins to feel unsafe, not because the receiver is cruel, but because the exchange lacks sacred respect. Safety is not merely about the absence of harm, it's about the presence of harmony. When your energy no longer feels safe, it doesn't always mean someone is toxic. Sometimes it means their chapter in your story has closed. People evolve at different speeds. What once was nourishing may now feel restricting. The same energy that comforted your old wounds might now irritate your healing. The same advice that once helped you survive may now hinder your growth. Energy safety shifts as you transform because your spirit demands different frequencies for different stages of becoming. But many resist this truth because they mistake longevity for loyalty. You tell yourself you owe them understanding, that walking away means betrayal. Yet, the greater betrayal is abandoning yourself to maintain a connection that no longer honors your peace. God does not ask you to sacrifice your soul to prove your compassion. He asks you to listen when your spirit grows restless, because that restlessness is the divine whisper guiding you toward higher alignment. Pay attention to how your body reacts in someone's presence. The body never lies. Do you feel tension in your shoulders when they speak? Do you find yourself censoring thoughts, minimizing emotions, or pretending to be less sensitive than you are? Do you feel pressure to perform rather than permission to just be? These are all signs your energy is withdrawing its consent. Your intuition speaks in sensations, the quickened heartbeat, the unease, the fatigue. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. When your energy no longer feels safe, the universe begins to restrict movement in that connection. Conversations become shallow, plans fall through, time distances you naturally. It's not punishment, it's divine protection. God will never allow your peace to remain in places that can no longer hold it. He will use discomfort to show you where your boundaries have been crossed and where your growth is no longer welcome. The moment you feel unsafe energetically is the moment your soul begins preparing for departure. This departure doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a slow fading. Fewer calls, shorter messages, less engagement. It's not bitterness, it's energetic withdrawal. Your spirit is reclaiming its space from environments that no longer feed it. The lesson is not in resentment, but in recognition. Recognize that not every soul you love is meant to walk with you through every layer of awakening. Some were there to teach you empathy, others to teach you boundaries. Both are sacred, but neither are meant to cage your evolution. As you grow more attuned to energy, you'll learn to trust this inner knowing faster. You'll stop explaining your intuition to those who dismiss it. You'll stop doubting the silence that follows your discomfort. You'll start honoring the truth that peace is your protection, and that any space requiring you to compromise, that peace is not holy ground. When your energy no longer feels safe, the divine is not abandoning you. It is calling you home to yourself. You are being asked to withdraw from frequencies that drain your light so you can return to the environments that replenish it. Because your purpose requires energy that feels safe, expansive, and alive. The more you honor that, the clearer your path becomes, and the more peace becomes your natural state rather than something you have to constantly defend. There are seasons when life feels like a circle, where you keep facing the same disappointment, the same heartbreak, the same kind of person in a different disguise. You wonder why, no matter how far you think you've come, you find yourself back in the same emotional landscape, repeating old reactions, feeling familiar pain. It's not coincidence. It's not punishment. It's the universe holding up a mirror until you finally see what you've been avoiding. When God repeats the lesson, it's not because He wants to hurt you. It's because He wants to heal you deeper than before. Lessons don't disappear because time passes. They dissolve when wisdom is integrated. Many people move on physically, but stay bound energetically to old cycles. You might leave the person, change the job, move to a new city, but if the pattern within you remains unhealed, the external world will rearrange itself to teach the same truth through a new form. This is divine repetition. It's not random misfortune. It's grace disguised as DAGUU. God's lessons often come wrapped in discomfort because the ego resists transformation. The soul seeks truth, But the ego clings to familiarity. When the lesson first appears, it whispers. When you ignore it, it speaks louder. And when you still refuse to listen, it begins to shake the ground beneath you, not out of cruelty, but because the soul cannot evolve in denial. Every repeated experience carries a message your spirit has not yet embodied, a truth you've acknowledged intellectually, but not lived emotionally. Perhaps you've prayed for peace, yet keep choosing chaos that feels like home. Perhaps you've asked for love, yet still settle for attention that costs your self-respect. Perhaps you've begged for purpose, yet remain surrounded by distraction. God doesn't withhold your blessings. He waits until you become the version of yourself capable of keeping them. The repeated lesson is not a delay, it's divine conditioning. It strengthens your discernment so you won't lose again what you're meant to carry forever. The hardest part about repeated lessons is realizing how much of the pain is self-inflicted. You start to see that it's not them this time. It's you reacting through the same unhealed wounds. The faces change, but the feelings are identical because the frequency hasn't shifted. The universe always mirrors your internal state. If you haven't healed the pattern of people pleasing, you'll keep attracting takers. If you haven't healed abandonment, you'll keep meeting those who confirm your fear of being left. The repetition isn't proof that you're cursed. It's proof that you're still learning to choose differently. When God repeats the lesson, He's asking you to stop asking why this happened to me and start asking, what is this trying to show me? Every cycle carries wisdom, but you can't receive it while resisting its reality. You must look directly at your choices, the ignored red flags, the unspoken boundaries, the comfort zones you've mistaken for loyalty. Growth begins the moment you take responsibility for your role in the repetition. Responsibility doesn't mean blame, it means power. It means you finally understand that the pattern will end the moment you stop feeding it with your energy. Repetition often comes wrapped in familiar emotions: attraction, excitement, comfort, nostalgia. The mind confuses familiarity with safety, but the soul knows better. The soul becomes restless when you try to return to what you've outgrown. That restlessness is divine friction, pushing you toward awareness. When God repeats the lesson, He allows discomfort to serve as direction. The pain isn't punishment, it's redirection. It's your spirit saying, this again, until you learn. But learning doesn't happen through avoidance. You can't escape divine lessons by running faster. You escape them by understanding deeper. Awareness is what dissolves the cycle. When you finally recognize the emotional trigger, the behavioral pattern, the unconscious belief, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop reacting from the wound and start responding from wisdom. That's when the test loses its power over you, and what once felt like chaos now becomes clarity. Sometimes the repetition isn't about external patterns at all. It's about inner surrender. God repeats the lesson of patience until you stop trying to control timing. He repeats the lesson of trust until you stop relying on your own understanding. He repeats the lesson of forgiveness until your heart stops building walls in the name of protection. Each repetition refines your character. You're being shaped for something greater, and shape cannot hold if it's built on pride, fear, or denial. It's tempting to call these seasons unfair, to ask why others seem to move on while you keep circling the same mountain. But what you see as delay is actually precision. God is too intentional to promote you prematurely. He won't elevate you into spaces your wounds would sabotage. So instead, He brings you back, not to punish, but to prepare. Every repetition is proof that your next level requires mastery, not movement. Spiritual growth is not linear, it spirals. You return to the same lessons, but each time from a higher perspective. What once broke you now reveals your strength. What once confused you now clarifies your boundaries. This is how the soul evolves, through layered learning. You're not failing, you're deepening. The same pattern that once trapped you becomes the path to your liberation when you finally meet it with awareness instead of avoidance. And as you integrate the lesson, you start noticing subtle shifts. The same kind of person no longer attracts you. The same argument no longer hooks you. The same situation no longer consumes your energy. That's how you know the lesson is complete, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you've changed the way you engage with it. What used to trigger reaction now invites reflection. What used to drain you now teaches you. What used to control you now frees you. When God repeats the lesson, it's because He refuses to let you settle for surface level growth. He loves you too much to let you mistake awareness for transformation. So He repeats it until the understanding becomes embodiment, until the wisdom isn't just known in your mind, but lived through your actions, boundaries, and choices. Because real healing is not remembering what hurt you. It's refusing to live in ways that recreate it. And divine love will always ensure that you learn, even if it means walking you through the same fire until you emerge purified instead of burnt